Here is a fact that should probably be generating more anxiety than it currently is. The workers most exposed to artificial intelligence disruption are not the ones without degrees, without credentials, or without options. According to research tracking actual AI usage across professional settings, the most exposed group earns 47% more on average than the least exposed group, is nearly 4 times as likely to hold a graduate degree, and is 16 percentage points more likely to be female. In other words, the people society spent the last 30 years telling to get educated, develop cognitive skills, and move into white-collar professional work are, structurally speaking, the ones sitting closest to the fault line. And almost none of the public conversation about AI and jobs is about them. So, to really get at what's happening here, we need to work through a few things. Why has the entire discourse about AI and employment been focused on the wrong workers? What does a new measurement framework out of MIT actually reveal about where the exposure sits? And then, and this is the part I find genuinely strange, what happens to the workers AI cannot touch? And why is that answer considerably more uncomfortable than most people expect? Let's start with the measurement problem, because I think it explains almost everything else. Imagine you are a doctor trying to assess a patient's cardiovascular health using only a bathroom scale. The scale produces a number. The number is accurate. It tells you something real about the patient. But it was never designed to look inside the body and the things that are most likely to cause a heart attack. Arterial inflammation, plaque buildup, electrical irregularities in the heart muscle are completely invisible to it. You could have a patient who looks fine by the scale's measure and is in serious trouble by any cardiology measure, and the scale would give you no warning at all. This is roughly the situation with our standard economic statistics and artificial intelligence. GDP, employment figures, unemployment rates, wage data. These tools were built to count jobs and people, and they do that reasonably well. What they were never designed to do is look inside a job and ask which components of it a machine can now technically perform. A lawyer does not disappear from the employment statistics when AI starts handling routine contract review. A financial analyst does not register as unemployed when an AI tool compresses a day's research into 40 minutes. The job is still there. The worker is still employed. The scale says everything is fine. But something meaningful has changed inside the work, and the instruments we use to track economic health simply cannot see it. This is what a research team at MIT set out to fix. Rather than asking the standard question, which jobs will AI eliminate, they asked a different one. For each occupation, what share of the economic value produced inside that job comes from skills that AI can already technically perform right now? The distinction matters enormously. An accountant might spend 60% of their working hours on document processing, data reconciliation, and routine analysis, and 40% on complex judgment, client relationships, and regulatory interpretation. So the MIT framework weights everything by wage value, by the actual economic contribution of each skill within each occupation, which gives you a number that reflects where the real exposure sits, rather than just a head count of potentially affected workers. To build this, the researchers created a detailed representation of 151 million American workers across 923 occupations and 3,000 counties. They mapped the skills each occupation requires using a database maintained by the U.S. Department of Labor that breaks jobs down into their actual component tasks. Things like analyzing data, coordinating with others, programming, critical thinking, and operating specialized equipment, each rated for importance and difficulty based on surveys of real workers. Then they cataloged more than 13,000 production-ready AI tools currently being deployed inside real companies, and ran every one of them through the same skill taxonomy. The number that comparison produces for any given occupation is the share of that occupation's wage value that sits in the overlap. And when you aggregate it across the whole economy, you get something the researchers called the Iceberg Index, which turns out to be precisely the right name for it. Here is why. If you look only at the tech sector, software engineers, data scientists, the workers generating most of the anxious headlines about AI layoffs, the exposure comes to roughly 2.2% of total U.S. labor market wage value, or about $211 billion across 1.9 million workers. That number is large enough to be alarming in absolute terms, but as a share of the overall economy, it is relatively contained. It is the part of the iceberg you can see above the waterline. In 2025 alone, more than 100,000 job losses were linked to AI restructuring in tech, and AI is already writing more code daily than every human developer on the planet combined. So the tip is real and consequential. But when you apply the same methodology to the full economy, to every occupation, not just the ones generating anxious tech sector coverage, the number does not grow incrementally. It jumps to 11.7% of total U.S. labor market wage value, or roughly $1.2 trillion, 5 times larger. And the skills driving that expansion are not exotic or specialized. They are things like document processing, routine analysis, information synthesis, and structured data handling. Capabilities that show up not just in software engineering, but in financial analysis, legal work, insurance claims processing, human resources, administrative coordination, and dozens of other white-collar occupations that have never appeared in a single headline about AI job losses. The same capability that makes a coding assistant useful to a developer overlaps heavily with significant portions of what a compliance officer, a radiologist's assistant, or a mid-level marketing manager does every day. So the exposure the public conversation has been focused on for 2 years accounts for roughly 1/5 of the total. The other 4/5 have been sitting below the waterline in industries and geographies and demographic groups that have been making career and educational decisions on the assumption that cognitive, credential-heavy professional work was where safety lay. That assumption, it turns out, was built on the bathroom scales reading, and the geography of this is stranger than most people would guess. If you had to name the states with the highest AI exposure, you would probably say California, Washington, New York, the tech hubs, the finance centers, the places generating most of the discourse. But the Iceberg Index says something different. South Dakota, North Carolina, and Utah show higher exposure values than California or Virginia. Tennessee's tech sector exposure is 1.3%, nothing that would register on any standard workforce planning instrument, but its overall iceberg score is 11.6%, meaning the white-collar workforce that keeps Tennessee's manufacturing economy running is roughly 10 times more exposed than the sector everyone has been watching. The fault lines run through places and demographics that nobody has been mapping. Now, a fair objection at this point is that technical capability and actual deployment are not the same thing, and the gap between them is currently enormous. For computer and mathematics workers, AI can technically handle around 94% of tasks by the index's measure, but in observed professional use, it is currently doing about 33%. The technical capability exists, but regulation, integration costs, liability concerns, and the simple organizational friction of replacing human workflows are slowing deployment considerably. But the leading edge is already visible. Entry-level employment in AI-exposed occupations has dropped 14% compared with the pre-ChatGPT era. Entry-level job postings across the U.S. have fallen 35% since January 2023. The friction points are real, but they are the kind that tend to resolve as technology matures and organizational familiarity grows. The question is less whether the exposure translates into displacement, and more when and how fast. Which brings us to the part of this story that I find genuinely underappreciated, and which the standard AI and jobs conversation almost never reaches. What about the workers the index shows as essentially unexposed? About 30% of the workforce, cooks, mechanics, plumbers, nurses, childcare workers, electricians, bartenders, performs physical, relational, and manual work that no language model or document processing AI can replicate. Surely these workers are the safe ones, and in one narrow sense, they are. Their jobs are not going to be automated by the tools the MIT index is measuring. But here is the uncomfortable economic dynamic that was already working against them before anyone had heard of a large language model. In 1965, an economist at Princeton named William Baumol noticed something odd about the performing arts. A string quartet playing Beethoven took 4 musicians and about 25 minutes in the 19th century. It took the same 4 musicians and roughly the same 25 minutes a century later. The performance had not become more efficient. No technology had compressed it, but the cost of staging that concert had risen dramatically, dragged upward by wages rising everywhere else as manufacturing and agriculture became vastly more productive. The cost per performance kept climbing, even though nothing about the performance improved. Economists call this Baumol's cost disease, and its fingerprints are all over the last 50 years of price data. Childcare, healthcare, education, skilled trades, and personal services kept getting more expensive because the work inside them is stubbornly resistant to productivity improvements. You cannot make a nurse see patients faster. You cannot make a plumber fix a pipe remotely. The only way to cover their rising wage bill is to raise prices, and that is what has happened. Now, if the Iceberg Index is roughly right, AI is about to accelerate the productivity of cognitive and administrative work dramatically. A financial analyst augmented by AI tools might compress a full day's research into an hour. A legal team with the right document processing stack might do the work of 3 times as many lawyers. And if that happens at scale, the Baumol effect accelerates with it. The gap between the productivity of AI-augmented cognitive work and the productivity of inherently human physical and relational work gets wider, which means the relative cost of the latter keeps rising faster. The nurse, the plumber, the childcare worker, their output does not scale with AI, so the cost of their work keeps climbing relative to everything around them. And most of what AI cannot touch is not optional. People do not pull children out of school because prices rise. These are services that governments are already struggling to fund adequately. The workers who are safe from AI disruption may find themselves in sectors that public budgets find increasingly difficult to support. So the picture that emerges from all of this is not the one most of the discourse has been drawing. It is not primarily a story about programmers being replaced by machines, though that is happening. It is a story about 2 simultaneous pressures. One driving displacement through the AI-exposed half of the workforce, the other driving unaffordability through the AI-insulated half, compressing from opposite directions toward the services and workers that societies most depend on. And the instruments most governments are using to plan their workforce responses can, by MIT's own estimate, explain less than 5% of the variation in actual AI exposure across states, which means the billions being directed at workforce preparation are, in a meaningful number of cases, aimed at the wrong places entirely. The MIT study is not a prediction. It tells you where the fault lines are. Whether anyone uses that information to actually reinforce the structures sitting on them is, as with most things in economics, a question about political will rather than analytical capacity. The map exists. Reading it carefully is a separate problem.